Our goal is revamping our email nurture strategies so we can actually write emails that our contacts anticipate, they look for, they engage with. They can't wait to get the next one. One might almost ask, is that really possible with email nurture? The way email nurture has been done in most B2B companies is it's almost been a paternalistic force feeding of our contacts. We're like, trust me, this is going to be good for you. I know you didn't ask for it, but here you go anyway. It gets results to a certain extent. People do open the emails, people do click on the links, but we tend to lose track of the downside, the negative side, the fact that inboxes are overwhelmed these days. And even when good content, valuable content hits your inbox, if you're not expecting it, if it's not something you asked for, a lot of times you're ignoring it, you're archiving it, you're saving it for later, or you're just deleting it. So we want to write emails that actually cut through that noise and do something a little bit different. Cathy and Romu, what's your experience been with email nurture?
Yeah, I'm going to echo what you just said, that I know I'm being targeted to receive emails. And unless it's really interesting, I'm going to pretty well ignore it. Yeah. And that's what I'm concerned about with our nurture emails, which is why I'm taking this course. So we can get more engagement, make it more interesting, and like you say, build anticipation and excitement.
Yeah.
Oh man, I could talk for 20 minutes, so I try not to.
Give it to us, man.
First, from a B2B standpoint, and even where I sit, I was really intrigued by the final title of this workshop that you picked, the binge-worthy aspect of it. It's a very interesting angle because there's this whole discussion of the attention economy. People don't have time, but if I'm starting a Netflix show, I'm gonna watch 1.5 hour episodes in a row because I'm hooked. So I do have the time when someone can grab my attention. I feel that most of the time I'm not in that position as a marketer because I don't have the content. For me, that's really the biggest part.
Wow.
Is the content is not there in the first place, or at least I feel like it's not valuable enough, or the angle is a bit outdated and too transactional and not educational enough. And so for a long time, even as a recipient, I was very disengaged with my inbox. It was more like, hey, get to inbox 0, just check everything, mark as read, and here you go, I'm done.
That's right.
But now that I found myself a bit more active on platforms like LinkedIn and being attracted by content that are not made by companies, but by creators, by people specifically. Those people, those creators are doing a great job transferring their followers into an email newsletter. And those newsletters are probably the only email content I could binge read. It reads like a LinkedIn post. It's easy to scan. The tone is very conversational. The content is very actionable. I can relate to it. It doesn't come from a place of I'm the authority and that's the only way to do it. So I've been very interested in trying to find ways to replicate that as a B2B marketing department. Do we need to find a way to put a face to it when it doesn't come from the company name? How do we produce more content that's relatable? All that kind of stuff.
Oh, interesting, Romy, because I too am thinking that our most engaging content right now is the stuff that our subject matter experts in our company are posting themselves. Wow. And they're doing these videos or putting themselves out there, like on LinkedIn. We started doing this LinkedIn live stream a few months ago, and I just find those moments they're just more real and what's the word I'm looking for? Trustworthy, because they're from people, not a corporation that wants to market.
Yes, I love that. I love that. Have you guys ever been in a timeshare sale presentation?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
This.
So
It seemed like a good idea.
Oh, you captured it exactly correct. It seemed like a good idea. They'll catch you when you're checking in. You're full of optimism. You're so naive. You're like, I'll do all the things. They're like, oh, we'll give you this breakfast buffet, this, that, and the other. So you take them up on the offer, but it's a lead magnet. And once they get you, oh, you're God. They put you through the ringer of the pressure sale. Sometimes B2B email nurture ends up feeling like that, where the brand is, do you want to buy now? Okay, how about now? How about now? Okay, how about if I say it this way? I'm not ready to buy. Goodness.
So it's all about intent, right? And knowing that your audience is interested.
Yeah, I really like how you've characterized that, Cathy. There's a study that HubSpot actually did a few years ago where they were evaluating the efficacy of their email nurture systems. The most unique thing about the 2017 experiment is that those nurture sequences were opt-in. They actually asked people, hey, we have this nurture sequence based on XYZ. Are you interested? If so, click here. And of course, when people opt in, they're way more engaged, both with the open rates and the click-through rates.
It almost feels like a ideal state. And maybe it's just a way for me to say, oh, I can't do this right now. But it's almost like it feels like it would require probably a larger team that I'm managing right now. I'm going back to content also. Honestly, it might be a bit of an excuse. I think it's feasible. It's just everybody needs to be bought in and say, hey, it might take a bit of time to deliver this, but once we're able to deliver it, it will pay off, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I think it's an interesting approach. It's definitely probably something that requires a bit more work ahead of time than a traditional email nurture.
That's insightful. That's insightful. Cathy, what does this make you think of?
It's making me think of gamifying emails, and I'm not sure how that works in the B2B space. Make it fun.
Yeah.
Make it a game.
Yeah.
I like maybe it's the title, Choose Your Own Adventure, but I like the idea of the opting into, this is what I want to know more about. I don't know. We've never tried anything like that. I'd love to.
Yeah. Romu, Cathy, both of you have really insightful thoughts here. And Romu, I appreciate you being very transparent in terms of this sounds ideal, but is it actually feasible? Is it practical? Is this something I can actually do? I really value that. And by the way, this is marketing, isn't it? It's, you're supposed to, ideally, you put a hypothesis out there into the marketplace. You see what how the marketplace responds to it, and then you have a dialogue. So I would suggest, I remember having conversations with other marketers over the past few years when we as an industry started to come to terms with this idea of gating versus ungating our ebooks and our best content. The industry practice was to gate your best content for about a decade. And then slowly marketers started to feel like, I don't know if that's best anymore. And so for the past 3 or 4 years on LinkedIn, you'll often see dialogue, you'll see back and forth. And I think where people are landing currently is that there's a lot of value in ungating some of your best content, but it's very difficult to flip the switch. It is very difficult to take a whole marketing content engine that's based on gated content and to just say, all right, we're ungating everything, release the hounds. Like, you have to do it step by step, piece by piece, little by little. Otherwise, you're going to lose your organization. You'll move too fast for them. Food for thought.
Yeah.
Interesting.
On that part, yeah, I think for when we talk about ungating content, the way I've tried to sell that internally is basically there are a couple of things. First, I feel like marketing is a bit more tied to revenue now than just the lead chasing, really, just for the sake of lead chasing. So the way I look at it is, yeah, maybe the MQL volume is going to be lower, but there are other top of the funnel metrics that you can look at. And really the biggest proxy for me when it comes to the benefit of ungating is I'm not collecting emails, but instead I'm increasing the size of my retargeting audience. And that's another KPI that I can look at and say, yeah, when we used to gate it, we got 50 leads out of it. But now that we ungated it, I have 200 visitors that I can retarget instead.
Wow.
That's the proxy.
I love that.
But when it comes to emails, yeah, I think it might be a slightly different topic than the ungating part, but it's more about segmentation, right? If if we go back to the choose your own adventure, that requires that then instead of having one experience, you may have 4 to 5 experiences. So the segments might be smaller, but they'll see a content that's more relevant to them. I think that's the promise. I think, yeah, unfortunately, I haven't had the chance to do that successfully quite yet. And what I've done in the past, basically those segments would end up being very small. So we ended up spending a lot of
Yeah.
time creating that content, and
Ah,
only a few people would actually see it. Yeah.
what a great point. Romu, I like that observation about the fact that if you want to do a choose your own adventure, it's hard to start just with one choice. You want to have 4 or 5 choices, but maybe we don't have to build them all at once if we're not doing a flip the switch type of approach. Let's say, for example, your organization already has one main email nurture sequence or a couple of them. And then you said, I want to experiment with an opt-in nurture sequence, almost like a mini email course, maybe like a 7-day email course. And you might say, what should that course be based on? What we've been talking about in this Bingeworthy emails course is the following. We want to make, if we're thinking about it as a mini email course, we want to make a course that evangelizes the problem, one of the biggest problems that our audience experiences, rather than evangelizing the product. A lot of B2B marketing is evangelizing the product. It's targeting that 5% of ideal customers who are in a buying cycle currently. They're looking for a solution. They know what their problem is. They have budget. It's targeting them, right? It's emphasizing product features. It's maybe not giving value up front, but it's promising, hey, after you become a customer, you're going to get all this value. So it's promising value at the end. It's educating the prospect on the product, and it's more information based. These are the features. We do this and we do that, and it connects to this, and so on. And often the metrics are funnel conversion. How efficiently can we move people from lead to qualified lead to pipeline and so on? That's when we're evangelizing the product. Every business needs this. So we're not trying to get rid of this. But I think evangelizing the problem possibly could be useful if we're thinking of those ideal customer profiles, those ideal client profiles who are not currently in a buying cycle. Maybe they're locked into a contract with a competitor. Maybe the problem that we could solve for them is more of a nuisance than an urgent problem, right? Their hair is not on fire yet. So they're in the 95% that they're not going to buy today, no matter how good our copy is, no matter how cheap our product, they're not going to buy today, but they might buy in the future. So for them, how could we talk more about the problem? How could we communicate that we understand or can give words to their pain better than they can? I think there's a lot of value in this. This is where we start to talk about edutainment, for example, where the content is entertaining, maybe it's funny or it's binge worthy, but you're actually learning something from it, sometimes without even recognizing it. So I'd love to get your reaction to this concept of evangelizing the problem.
I completely agree with being all about the value and solving a challenge as opposed to forcing a product and its features down somebody's throat. Like, you want to make sure that the value is the upfront. What does this mean to you? How's it going to help solve your challenges? I think that's how we have to market products and our services anyway.
It
This
does.
totally makes sense to me.
It does. It does.
When I see this, I want to go back to content again. I've been in that position, and I feel like I'm finally in a place where I can evangelize the problem a bit better.
Mm.
For the longest time, my only option was to evangelize the product
Wow.
because I didn't have the content.
That's a good
But
point.
then the email tend to sound like buy our product every single time, right?
That's
We're talking about the product. Now
Mhm.
that we've done some work and we have better access to our customers, I would say, at the very least, we can start speaking their language because we're letting the customers doing the talking.
Wow.
So we've done webinars with them, we've done live sessions with them, we have case studies with them. And yeah, a lot of it is still very much traditional in the format of it. So it's definitely more educational than edutainment at this point. We're not doing edutainment at this point. I would love to get there, and I do think that's a little bit of internal selling that needs to be done. But yeah, being able to.
Yeah, that's a really good point you make,
Yeah.
Romu, because and one of the things we struggle with here is getting those case studies and getting the buy-in from actual clients, which is where you're going to bring it home. Like we understand that as marketers, that the more you can frame the problem that's spoken, that's a testimonial from the client, or this is how this company helped solve my biggest challenges, that's going to do so much more for you. So it is all about the content. Absolutely. So we're working hard to try to boost our specific client case studies and that type of content.
I love that. I love that. We're going to start talking about this idea of different levels of content value. A lot of the content that is SEO optimized, if we go back and historically look at where digital B2B marketing was about 10 years ago, a lot of it, there was a lot of value in providing the what, answering what does this product do, and so on, giving that detailed information. So when someone searches for you on Google, they find your website, it's keyword optimized, they come to your website, and then they can consume, they browse through your website and so on. Now they're in your content ecosystem. As social media started to take hold, the who started to become a bit more interesting, where personalities started to become, this doesn't necessarily have to just be funny content. This could be like a Chris Walker, for example, in the demand gen world, or a Dave Gerhardt, where it's I know that individual, I respect them. Every time their content comes up, it's less important what the topic is, but because it's Chris Walker, I'm like, oh yeah, he always has interesting stuff. Or it's Dave Gerhardt or Jess Cook. I'm gonna go listen. So the who started to become important. Chat GPT and AI, I think they're gonna take over that first level, the what. They're gonna dominate that level. And we have to find ways to start to move up this pyramid. Otherwise, we're going to become commoditized. So something like the how. I know the ABCs of what's involved in doing this, but how do I actually do it? Could I watch you doing it? Could I ask questions specific to my situation? It's a bit hard to do that with Google or ChatGPT right now. And so these are some of the different levels that I think we can think about as we think about how we want to deliver. So I grew up reading comic books as a kid in Nigeria, used to read all the Spider-Man and Superman and all that good stuff. And I was a very shy kid, but this sort of it fired up my imagination and allowed me to see more for myself by putting myself into these protagonists' shoes. And so when I became a parent, I decided I wanted to create heroes for my kids as well. And I ended up studying fiction writing and really getting deep into the hero's journey and mythology. So much fun. But I started to realize as a B2B marketer that a lot of what works in story actually works in marketing as well. Having a narrative, for example, breaking down your message into acts and not vomiting everything onto them all at once. Even seeing the different roles that are present in the hero's journey. A lot of us tend to see our product as the hero or our brand as the hero, where in actuality, a lot of times our brand isn't the hero, the customer is the hero. And we at best might be like we're like, what's his name? Gandalf? Was Gandalf from Lord of the Rings? Yeah. Gandalf from Lord of the Rings, or Glenda the Good Witch in The Wizard of Oz. Like, we're more the mentor, Mr. Miyagi. So there's a lot from fiction, especially children's books, that we could apply to marketing.
Yeah, I think storytelling also, yes, basically what you're saying is becoming more important now as a way to, if not stand out, at least keep the readers engaged. Because and that's why I'm so fascinated with people that find ways to write their emails in the way we write on social media. Now that the hook is so important, that's the same thing. I feel like every sentence needs to make the story progress and not be just facts, benefit, features kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Love that. So I'd love to gain perspective from you both on what your experience has been with storytelling, with content creation in the B2B space. Maybe what successes have you had and what challenges? Romu, you've already alluded to some of the limitations that you've experienced. But what sorts of challenges have you had, and what successes have you had?
Hopefully that will answer your question. But the first thing that comes to mind is related to what I mentioned is how can we write more engaging copy?
Yeah, yeah.
Because even now that we have access to better customer testimonials, could be a written case study or a video or something along those lines, I feel like we have a tendency to still go super quickly into the solution is our product, right? Instead of using the story of the customer as the leading factor.
Wow.
I have a few things that comes to mind. At my full-time job, we promote healthcare communication to providers, physicians, practice managers, nurses, things along those lines. There's a lot of power in those stories. So I love not using their first name, mentioning their job title, mentioning their journey, how they started working there,
Wow.
why they thought change mattered, and really what it meant for the people that work there versus,
Wow.
hey, we save time and money kind of thing. So trying to find ways to do that is not always intuitive because we want to put the product front and center. But usually I feel like it works better when it's a light mention. And it's just so happened that we were also part of that journey with them. Also going back to the way we track KPIs and what we think, how we think about what's a successful campaign. I think for the
Yes.
longest time we were like, oh, email is not doing anything for us. We're not getting leads, we're not getting conversions from email. And my perspective was to say, I'm not really worried about that because attribution is a whole other topic and it can get really, we can get really in the weeds, but I want to know what's the open rate. I want to know what's the click-through rate. Everything that happens after is a bonus. If we have good open rate, good click-through rate, then the email filled their part of their job. And ideally, it would lead to business immediately or later on. We'll see. But the email did its part. So that's what I'm trying to work on right now.
That's good.
This is a recent move for me from purely content writing into using it in email nurture sequences and actual marketing activities as opposed to just feeding the content engine.
Yeah.
So I'm learning a lot just from this conversation that I think about making those emails really personal and taking content to that level where you actually are injecting a personality in the story can elevate it to something that resonates with people. When people read about people, it's just like on social, right? You do videos and you use pictures of people. Those are definitely more engaging than facts and figures.
Cathy, you're a content person. You got away with words now. You said when people read about people. You don't have to finish that because that immediately means something to all of us. When people read about people, all of a sudden the brand fades into the background, but it never goes away. Consider that the brand always provides some sort of unifying context. For example, we're all in this conversation today unified by a struggle with email nurturing or maybe email marketing in general, just an idea, a hope that it could be better. We're not talking about any product features, whether it's Active Campaign, HubSpot, Marketo, it doesn't matter. But we're unified by this problem that we're struggling with. And at some point, if this conversation progresses, we might get to the level of, okay, now we know what to implement. How do we use XYZ product? But the fact that the brand is not front and center right now, it's just people sharing experiences, venting, talking about the struggles, and we're learning from each other. So this is so valuable to me.
Me too. I'm already like thinking, okay, a good email nurture sequence might be taking people down this funnel of understanding. Meet Mark. He's trying to figure out how to move his, like from our business perspective, how to move his paper catalog into an online format. What are his challenges? What's he struggling with? Something like that. And then the next few emails take you on that journey where you find out what happens.
Come on, Cathy. Come on,
I'm going to
Cathy.
write the next Bridgerton series.
This is good. This is good. I love how even as we're playing with this, where it's imagination, but you're not trying to get them to the end of the book by the end of that first email. And now all of a sudden you started a story that's about a person. Meet Mark. I don't know even know if Mark exists. I want to know what happened to
I
Mark.
don't know. I'm just pulling out a name out of my hat.
And it's like you'd share just enough to get people invested. It's especially relevant. The stories that speak most to me, Cathy. I talked about reading comic books as a kid. And this is interesting for anyone who's followed comic books, the superhero comic books. There's DC and there's Marvel. Those are the two biggest brands. And they were pretty distinct. DC has Superman and Wonder Woman, and there was something unique about DC Comics different from Marvel Comics. DC Comics was almost represented as gods amongst men. It was almost like mythology, these mythical, greater than, larger than life characters, almost perfect characters coming to live amongst us, right? And to bestow us with their goodness. But then Marvel was different from DC in that it would take ordinary people, broken people, flawed people, and would give them some sort of ability, but their flaws never went away. Their struggle never went away. So in my case, I identified with Peter Parker, Spider-Man. Peter Parker is a white teenager from Queens, New York. I was a socially anxious Black kid from Nigeria. We have nothing in common except his brokenness felt like my brokenness. And because I was like, despite his brokenness, he was still able to help people and to become something greater. I saw myself in the story. So whenever we can tell stories that our audience sees themselves in, they're hooked. They're bought in.
Yeah, I got to figure out a way to do that.
We're here to help. We are definitely here to help. Great to see you on camera, Romu.
Yeah, I finally made it to the camera.
All right, all right. This
Nice.
is great. This is great. This has been really fruitful. One of the things that I'd love for us to progress to is talking a little bit about our individual ICPs, our ideal client profiles. Sometimes we have those definitions in our heads and they make sense, but when we have to say them out loud, now the world gets to, it's like a stress test. Would you share a little bit about your ICP?
It's a bit complex. It's
We like that.
definitely a good stress exercise. We work in the healthcare industry. So basically healthcare communication and scheduling, mostly on the provider side. So that would be physician, nurses, and all the other staff related to that. And basically we kind of separated our ICP into two type of organizations. First is private independent medical practices. They can go as low as a solo practitioner, so one doctor that opened their practice, or a group of physicians that work independently. And then basically hospitals and health systems. This is where it gets a little bit muddy because of the healthcare industry. And sometimes we think we're working with an independent medical practice, but they're actually affiliated with a hospital, might use the system to take call. They might use that system to take call when they go to the hospital, but they don't have it when they go back to their private practice. So it gets very muddy. But so on the independent medical practice side, it's physicians and office/practice managers, so like front office kind of thing. And then for hospitals, yeah, it's physicians, nurses, and then it could be a bunch of other stuff. It could be the chief nurse officer, it could be the chief nurse information officer, it could be finance. It gets very complex on the enterprise side of things. So the whole account-based marketing ABM strategy is what we're trying to do. And the buying cycles are very different too. So if you talk to a solo practitioner that needs a new call service tomorrow, it's probably going to happen within a month or two. When you talk about a complex solution that needs to be deployed through multiple locations and departments, and it needs to go to finance, and it goes to IT, and it needs to go to compliance, it's probably going to take 12 to 18 months, if not more.
Wow.
So,
big difference. Big.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. So this is great, Roma. You actually have a really good grasp, and you were able to explain that in a way that I understood, despite the complexities. Let me ask, if I may, and Cathy, your questions are welcome here, of course. Let me ask about the private independent medical practices. Let's talk about them first. If we went into the minds of one of these people, whether it's front office or a nurse or a physician, what are some of the frustrations that they actually have around communication and scheduling?
Yeah, so for medical practices, most of the time they're using a traditional live agent service. That means that, especially after hours when the physician is not in the office, if there is any call coming, there's going to be a live agent managing that for them. And the goal is to filter urgent versus non-urgent calls, to redirect calls to the proper provider, or potentially even to 911 if for some reason the person did not do that. And basically making sure that an off-call doctor doesn't get a call at 3 a.m. for something that could have waited the next day for a routine prescription refill. The main challenge that they're experiencing is that those live agents are poorly trained. The triage and the routing is not being done properly, and there's a quality into that training that is going down right now because those type of companies have a hard time recruiting the right people. And then the second thing is that is usually the pricing is based on call volume. So for some reason, if you decide to take 3 days off around Memorial Day and you get a surge in call, you're going to come back to a crazy invoice.
Wow.
And what we provide is app-based and it's flat fee. So it makes it definitely more cost affordable for them. There's no fluctuation based on the volume. And because we're able to use technology to set up call writing rules ahead of time with them, it's a bit more predictable. We know that they're not going to get their prescription refill call at 3 a.m. when they're trying to get some rest.
Wow. Very interesting, especially as someone who maybe has been a consumer or customer of these sorts of systems, because we have kids and sometimes kids will get sick at inconvenient times. So I've had the experience of calling the after hours number before, but I've certainly not had insight into the pain that they sometimes experience on the other side.
Yeah.
So your goal as a marketer is to sway people from using these typical, like the more traditional call centers and move to something like this that can help manage the inflow of business.
Yeah, a lot of it is change management. It really is. It's, hey, we've been using these guys for 15 years. And if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And we have to tell them it is broken.
Wow.
Yeah, I can see that.
But let me dig into that a little bit more, Romu. And Cathy, if you don't mind bearing with us for just a minute or two more, because this is where I think the conversation really gets good and the value potentially could be teased out. It sounds like some of these prospects don't necessarily recognize the cost, the damage of using traditional systems. Now, you've talked, Romu, about unpredictable costs sometimes during a surge, like over a long vacation weekend. Okay, I get that. You've talked about the issue of live agents sometimes being poorly trained. By the way, is that something that your company fixes, or do you run into the same live agent issue?
So we rely on live agents for specific scenario, but we alleviate most of it by using our technology to create rules in the first place.
Okay.
So each type of having clear prompts when you hear the voicemail or the call prompt before you reach out to someone, we want to route that to the appropriate person. So you don't get to a live agent right away. You have to pick the right prompt. And if for some reason they pick the wrong one, then we'll have a live agent come in.
That's interesting. The reason, and Cathy, I want to make sure we have an opportunity to talk about your ICP. So I'll just respond, Romu, that this is really great. I'd love to continue this conversation maybe in the Slack group. But the reason I'm really interested in digging more and more into the pain that they're feeling is maybe especially for your other group of customers, the ones with the hospital and health systems with the 12+ month buying cycle. No matter how good your features are, a lot of times they're not going to be available to even consider you for a year. How do you now have a dialogue with them in the meantime? If the only thing you have to talk about is product features, that's one conversation, and then they'll say, okay, call us back in 11 months.
Yeah.
So how could we maybe evangelize the problem? How could we interview more of these hospital and health systems, these chief nurse officers? I didn't know that was a job title. Chief nurse information officers. What do they struggle with? What does it look like when there's a surge? Like we could imagine a whole show like an ER about, we could almost call it The Surge, and interviewing different chief nurse officers about what was the worst weekend surge you ever had. What happened? We're not even trying to sell anything. We're just like, what happened? And then they start to unpack the stories, and you become the vehicle that just brings these stories to life without talking about your products.
Yeah, that is true.
I love that idea. Great idea.
Yeah.
You got to do it. The Surge. Tune in for the next episode of The Surge.
Not to be confused with The Purge.
Because
no, that was too scary, that one.
That was something different.
I have to go because I have another thing going on. Yeah.
So sorry about that.
It's been enjoyable. Thank you.
Very good. Let's see if we can connect on the next one and maybe asynchronously, either through email or Slack, and we'll continue the conversation.
I'll try to be active on Slack. Yeah.
I know you're going through a busy time. It was great having you here. Thanks a lot, folks. I enjoyed
Nice meeting you.
Thanks, Bolaji. Thanks,
Take care.
Cathy.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.